Iran has announced it's to boost production of low-level enriched uranium, surpassing the stockpile limit set by the 2015 nuclear agreement, and it's happening soon.
In 10 days' time, on June the 27th, we will exceed the 300-kilogram limit on enriched uranium allowed under the nuclear deal. After that, we will continue to increase the speed of production drastically.
Well, a White House representative has responded to that statement by claiming Tehran is blackmailing the international community and calling for increased pressure on Iran. Igor Zhdanov joined me earlier in the studio to explain where the latest developments leave the 2015 nuclear agreement.
The deal is falling apart, so it is pretty much as big as it gets. Because Iran is giving a final warning. In 10 days, they will start enriching uranium beyond the limits set by the deal. And I'm not talking just the civilian sort of levels. They could easily reach those levels of enrichment that would constitute a weapons-grade level of enrichment, and which could lead to Iran obtaining a nuclear weapon. And I mean, Iran is saying that it is a tit-for-tat measure. They're saying that if the United States, they had dropped out of the deal like a year ago, last year, this whole year Iran has been very patient, but they're saying, well, if one side is not, following the deal, then why should they?
Relations between the US and Iran have been on this downward spiral, I think it's safe to say, for quite some time, but it did come into renewed focus, didn't it, this month?
Totally. I mean, just last week, 2 oil tankers were attacked in the Gulf. There were explosions, basically, in the Gulf of Oman. And the United States, for instance, they were very, very quick to pin the blame on Iran for doing so. And some Middle Eastern allies, they jumped on that wagon as well. Have a listen.
We are confident that we can take a set of actions that can restore deterrence, which is our mission set.
You say a full range of options. Does that include a military response?
Of course.
Sometimes even obvious things must be said out loud. And Trump does it. In his current firm stance against Iran's aggression in the Gulf of Oman, in the Persian Gulf, as well as in the region in general.
The Iranian regime did not respect the Japanese Prime Minister's visit to Tehran. It replied to his effort by attacking 2 tankers, one of which was Japanese.
Igor, one thing all those clips we just saw have in common, they're all US allies.
Yeah.
What about other global reaction? What's Europe saying?
Oh, well, interesting thing about that video is that those are pretty much the only US allies that are with Washington on, on this whole thing, pointing their finger of blame at Iran and saying, yeah, Tehran had something to do with it. When it comes to Europe, well, they're not as trusting, I should say, as Saudi Arabia and Israel.
We call upon sober assessments and wait for some credible evidence to be presented. It's ridiculous to cite secret data in this case.
Already in the last days, we have called for the maximum restraint. The world cannot afford another crisis, especially in an area like that.
First of all, we need to investigate who is responsible for the attacks. We can't say this or that country was responsible without providing any evidence.
Iran, by the way, they said that if they indeed wanted something going on in the Gulf of Oman, if they wanted to block trade, to block this trade route, they wouldn't have needed a diversion to do so. They would have done it openly, saying, yeah, we're blocking it. They're saying that Iranian military is strong enough to do it out in the open, play by the rules. So we can clearly see that there's a lot of distrust when it comes to Washington's claims. Not many people are on board. And some inside the US government are blaming Trump for seeding this distrust.
The problem is that we are struggling, even in the midst of this solid evidence, to persuade our allies to join us in any kind of a response. And it shows just how isolated the United States has become.
So it does seem that Trump has backed himself into a corner somewhat. He has been so vehement in this stance since the election campaign that Iran is bad, that Tehran is this nest of evil, this cradle of evil. Now Europe doesn't want this happening. Europe is not engaging in this sort of rhetoric. I mean, people inside the US government, people in Washington are not on board. They are blaming Trump for that. And so really, Trump has quite a lot in front of him, quite a lot to do if he wants his policy to succeed.
Well, we took the chance to ask people in New York what they thought about the potential of military action between Iran and the U.S.
Can you imagine a situation where you would be in support of a war with Iran?
I'm not in support of a war, period. Wars don't stop, though. After one war, it's another war, and then another war, then another war. You know, I think there's other ways to solve problems and go about things.
Open assassinations and bombing other people. And we knew about it and could prove it. I think we need real proof that some type of activity is actually happening where people are losing life, losing land, where some type of injustice is happening at the hands of Iran. But at this point, I don't really know that that's necessarily truthful.
A terrorist attack on, innocent people, something like 9/11 happens. Of course, a response is necessary and immediate. Is war the answer to that? Maybe not, maybe. But I still think, personally, we should find a different solution besides war. We've been through many wars, a lot of people have died, and it doesn't seem to make the issues go away.
Unless Iran is having violence against the whole world, I think the country maybe can resolve its own issues without other countries' interference. All I can say is I hope nobody gets hurt. I hope for world peace.
Well, Alessandro Bruno from Gulf State Analytics says a conflict with Tehran would have dire consequences for the U.S.
Starting a war with Iran, it would be unlike any other war that the United States has engaged in before abroad. That would be a conflict that in some ways might be worse than Vietnam. It certainly won't be Iraq. The problem is that Pompeo and Bolton are in charge of foreign policy. I don't think Trump really has the details in hand. It's like he's a rider on the horse, but he doesn't have the reins. And of course, they will use this tool, the authorization without Congress, based on terrorism, because they will present whatever Iran does in the Persian Gulf or elsewhere as an act of terrorism. That is the best way these days to get Americans behind an attack.